Well, good afternoon, everyone. Just wanted to send, as I have been doing, send another video through. It's funny looking back on the number of videos that are now up on that YouTube channel. It's quite a number. Rosie has helpfully separated them out into something like pastoral thoughts or something, and then Sunday live streaming, and also the Johns Haven Baptist ones as well. So they're a bit more organized than they were before. What I find funny about looking back at them is just the change in my own appearance, particularly with the hair. It's early on it looks quite tidy, and it's obviously just recently been done, and then gradually as the weeks and inevitably months go by, that begins to change quite dramatically. But nonetheless, just wanted to send through another one of these and today I wanted to look at a couple of verses in the book of Proverbs. I love Proverbs. I've been getting more to grips with it over the past few years, and there's just so much, as is obviously said. There's so much wisdom in there for us, and just great words from God for us today. And obviously there's a whole lot in there. And I'm thinking I might do a few more this week because I keep coming over ones that either make me smile or just think are really helpful to us. But one that I wanted to look at, I should say one, I think it counts as one, but two verses from Proverbs 26 and verses 4 and 5. These verses have puzzled people down the centuries, but 26 verses 4 and 5 says, "Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him yourself. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes." So you can see why immediately this can confuse people, because they read it, and on the one hand they say, verse 4 is saying, don't answer the fool according to his own folly, his own foolishness, in case I become like him myself. But then verse 5 seems to say, oh, answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. So some people get confused by this. One of the commentaries, I think it was in this one, Eric Lane on Proverbs, I think he was saying that actually in the some rabbis got so annoyed at this that not all of them, not a general sense, but there were some that questioned the canonicity of the Bible, the actual, or of this book, the inspiration of Proverbs, because they think it just seems to contradict itself. It doesn't make any sense. But rather the point, there is a really helpful point in here when we understand and we sit and we think a bit more on these verses and think upon what's actually being said. And really apply that to our own situations and our own modern day. And I believe this is so applicable. Obviously, God's word is always applicable throughout all the centuries, but there is a sense here in which, we would do well to listen to what a teacher has to say here in Book of Proverbs. So, first of all, he says, "Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him yourself." So I think we've actually all known this, where we've got into conversations with people, or we've sort of, whether it's to do with faith or whatever the case may be, but quite often I think it's to do with faith, where someone tries to engage you in a conversation and they ask you something very provocative, or they're trying to get a response out of you, and our natural instinct quite often is to just immediately respond and try and answer the question, or try and engage and try and get into a bit of a back and forth. Now, one of the problems is that sometimes when you respond to certain people, you just shouldn't have bothered, because you realize you get to the end of the conversation, that was a waste of time. That person was not looking for a conversation. That person was not looking to listen to anything I had to say. They were just trying to be provocative. They were just trying to catch me out. They were just trying to trip me up, or it may just be the demeanor that they had. They were maybe angry. They were maybe drunk. You try engage with someone in the pub. That's like always depending on the amount of alcohol they've had. That can be a bit of a challenge, and depending on their demeanor, depending on what they're saying. And he says, don't answer them lest you become like them yourself. And I think that can maybe mean that you descend into the kind of way of discussing that they are, that you start responding in a way that isn't really you, and you start kind of getting into a bit more of a argument and a bit of a kind of angry sort of discussion, rather than a good, productive and fruitful conversation, and a way to move forward. And this is part. So just I think this is part of the the overarching or underlying principle, however you want to put it, for this proverb is it's saying that there's a time to know when to answer and when to respond, and there's a time to know when to not. I think it's Ecclesiastes, isn't it? It says there's a time to speak, and there's a time to listen. I think there's a time to ignore, and there's just you're just not going to get anywhere with this person. There's a time to give up with that. And he's sort of saying, answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you become like him yourself. And you kind of descend into that almost get the picture of a playground, two kids arguing that aren't really arguing about anything. You listen, they're just shouting. It's got the stage where they're just like shouting insults at each other, like, yeah, well, so are you, or so's your face, and those kind of things that don't really get you anywhere, and just really no one's listening to each other. And the person who has started this isn't wanting that. He's a fool. He's an idiot. He doesn't want that conversation. He doesn't want to be wrong. He doesn't want to be open to that possibility. He doesn't want to learn. Goodness no, he doesn't want. He's a fool. He's not wise. Wise people want to learn. Fools don't want to learn anything. And so he's in this position. He's not really listening. And actually, in answering them, you're just getting into a pointless discussion. And we see this in the world of social media all the time. I know people that have said, I don't have social media for that purpose, because they said I wouldn't be able to not respond to things. and you see on Twitter, these trolls and idiots that just are determined to get into an argument and just a back and forth. And when it's not even a face-to-face thing, it's not even you realize you're responding to someone who is not looking for that. They're not looking for wisdom. They're not looking for a good conversation. They're not looking for any kind of helpful discussion. They're just there to insult and to be childish. And so it's kind of like, if you're on Facebook, you're on Twitter or something, the thing to do at that point is just ignore it. Like, let's not get into this. I can see where this is going. I can tell the difference between someone who wants a good conversation and someone who is just a troll. Like, it's just really looking to provoke in a particular way. And this is the difference when you see between verses 4 and 5. So 5 says, answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. So it seems that there is a time when obviously it's appropriate to answer the fool, to respond to them and to say something. And this can be for different reasons. By the way, I've been really helped by a lot of commentaries here. And one of the, I'm just like advertising commentaries, but one, Derek Kidner, who's done a lot of Old Testament stuff, but his one on Proverbs was helpful in this, in that he gives the example of Paul actually with the Corinthians. So particularly in 2 Corinthians, where he's writing this letter to the Corinthians to correct them on some stuff, to correct them on some bad teaching that they've been getting from the so-called super apostles, the shiny apostles there that seem to have all the answers. And he's correcting them reluctantly, but I think he's doing it because he cares about the Corinthian people. So there's a danger when if someone is just left unchallenged. There are times where if they're left unchallenged, it's bad, because because they haven't been challenged on the issue. They are wise in their own eyes, so they think, there's a difference between the guy who's just looking for an argument and the guy who actually says something and thinks it's true and is sort of at the danger of being wise in their own eyes, when actually it's damaging to themselves. What they're saying or what they're teaching is damaging to both themselves and their hearers, so the people around them as well. So I think Paul has a concern for the Corinthians when he says, challenge that, because he needs to challenge it, because what they're saying is wrong. What they've been saying about Paul is wrong, but the Corinthians are starting to believe it. They're starting to believe the lies about Paul, and ultimately the lies about God. And so Paul at that point says, no, let's talk about this. Let's get this sorted out. And so there is a time when that's necessary, and largely it's when the person themselves or people around them are in danger of kind of being led astray and believing some really bad stuff, or just a time when the person is saying things. They might not be the wisest person in the world, but they're open to being corrected. I think they have at least that level of wisdom where they're able to say, oh, maybe I am wrong on that. That's a person that you're willing to engage with, a genuine person, a sincere person who is actually open to a discussion, which, as we've seen in our day, in our polarizing culture, it's very hard to find, and we tend to just shut people down who maybe disagree, whereas actually there's room for that conversation and there's that room for that discussion. And what really has been saying here is it takes wisdom to see the difference in those conversations. It takes wisdom to know when to engage with someone and when to just be like, look, this isn't really going anywhere. This is a bit pointless. And I think one thing I find really helpful, again, just another book there, but a couple of years ago I went through, as a daily devotion, Tim Keller's The Way of Wisdom, which is a year in the book of Proverbs. And he addressed, I was trying to find, I bet Keller said something about this, and so apparently on August 22nd, he addresses these verses and says, and puts it under the heading temperament. And he says, while seeming to contradict each other, these two sayings, juxtaposed, are meant to make a point. Sometimes it is best not to engage a fool in an argument, and other times it is. How do you know when to do which? The markers to help with this discernment are listed. If there is no chance of correction, and you will end up giving the foolish person only a greater opportunity to express his folly, then just avoid the engagement. But if there is a chance you may see where he is wrong, then plunge in, using all the insights for speaking and listening we have been discussing. That means throughout these devotions he's been looking at what Proverbs says, of course, about listening and speaking and when to do it, when not to, and so on. But there is an even larger point to be made. Most of us temperamentally will default to always avoiding engagement, and others will be attracted to debating. Sometimes our instincts will be right, but often they are not. So be wise enough to think things out and sometimes go against your instincts. To which of these two approaches are you more temperamentally disposed? When was the last time you went against your temperament and it turned out to be a wise thing to do? So there's that sense in which it's knowing the person that you're speaking to and engaging with, but also knowing yourself and knowing what your temperament is. Are you the person? So I would say if I'm on that spectrum, I would lean more towards like not engaging in conflict, like whatever. And sometimes I need a kick up the backside to say, no, that needs to be, you need to get involved there, you need to challenge that and so on, especially as a pastor as well. So we need to be doing that. So I know that of myself, so sometimes I have to go against my instincts, as Keller says, but others will be the opposite of that. Others, if they're on that spectrum, would be further to the other side, where they would say, well, I love a good fight, or I love a good debate or a good argument. You know, are you the person around the table that's like, right, let's get involved, let's get on with it. And so, and what you may need is to say, actually, I should probably take a step back here. This isn't necessary. I don't need to engage with this person, or I don't need to crush this person either. And sort of know when to speak and when to listen. So I think it's basically about having the wisdom to know when to engage, and that involves knowing who you're talking to as much as possible, and also knowing your own instincts and knowing when is going to be a good discussion, a fruitful discussion, a helpful and healthy debate, even a good argument, so to speak, or when it's just going to be like, this isn't going to be worth it. As you get going and you think, nah, this is just a waste. This person isn't really being honest here. They're not really wanting to talk. They just want to provoke and be, try and get a response out of you, that kind of thing. So, and ultimately, almost forgot to mention, how could I forget this? We see this as with all things, most perfectly and brilliantly demonstrated in Jesus. I mean, the way Jesus responds to people is so fascinating. How many times did the Pharisees come to him and say, ask him a question, and his response, because our response would be, right, I'll give you, and when they go to, we would want to respond in a particularly strong way. Jesus often doesn't answer their questions. Jesus gets to the heart of the issue. I mean, we're even looking on Sunday at Luke 6, and he said, why do your, they come to him and say, why are your disciples doing what's not lawful on the Sabbath? And in that occasion, Jesus does respond to them and say, well, let's look at the Old Testament. Let's see the Old Testament. He takes them to the Word of God. On other times, he asks them the question, tell me, and he gets to the heart of the matter. He says, tell me, is it, on the next passage, he says, on the Sabbath, is it right to do good on the Sabbath? Is it good to heal a man on the Sabbath? Because he's about to heal this guy. Tell me, is this the right thing to do? and they remain silent because they realise, oh, he's got right to the heart of the matter. But quite often they come up and ask him a question. He doesn't respond to the question. The question is dumb, and he knows exactly what they're trying to do, and it's a waste of time. In other ways, he very much does get to the heart of what they're saying, and just immediately responds to them and kind of cuts through. And so we can look at Jesus and say, well, he knew exactly how to respond and when, because he was the perfect man. So and he knew when to respond to a question, whether that was for the Pharisees themselves or whether it was for those hearing. Because that's the thing, Jesus often is aware of the crowds that are around and those who maybe took the Pharisees very seriously. So Jesus knows when to deconstruct what they're saying, but equally knows when to keep silent or when to just ask another question that gets right to the heart of the matter. Like, let's cut the nonsense. Let's get to the real issue. And excuse me. And Jesus was very, very good at that. And Jesus even was silent as the chief priests and the Sanhedrin, as they questioned him and mocked him and tried to have him prosecuted. He remained silent until he said, "You will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven," and put himself in that position. Even when false accusations were made against him, there was times he didn't respond because he knew what he had come to do, and he knew how best to respond. He knew he had to go to the cross anyway, but he also knew how best to respond in every situation. So it's knowing when to speak, when not to speak, when to listen, when to engage with someone, and how best to do so. And as the book of Proverbs tells us throughout, the whole life of the Christian, the whole life of the believer involves a need for wisdom. We need to pray for that wisdom, and James says that the one thing that, isn't it, that's one thing that we can ask for, that God will never say, nah, I'm not going to give you wisdom. That's one of the things that we can pray to him and ask for, and God will supply that. It's a great thing to ask for. So anyway, just some thoughts on an interesting and sometimes confusing proverb, but to help us think through how we engage with people and how we engage with the world around us, and as we engage people with the gospel. So I hope that's helpful to you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, or whichever day you watch this on, and that everyone's doing okay and as well. Okay, thanks.